Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about an interesting concept that is developing in a certain pop culture market that I talk an awful lot about on this particular channel. And no, it is not vintage video games. Today, we are going to be talking about vintage comic books. Now, if you've watched any of the other videos I have done on this particular topic, you know that right now there is a massive speculative euphoria surrounding a lot of these pop culture markets, and comic books are by no means immune. I've told you guys that Incredible Hulk 181, which is a key coveted Bronze Age issue, no disagreement there, in CGC 9.4 condition is now selling for over $21,000 on average, when literally 5 months ago, you could have got a copy for $10,000. So prices are rising exponentially on these particular collectibles. Now, as a result, a lot of people are going to be priced out of this particular market. And to be fair, if we look at some of the coveted keys like Detective Comics 27, Action Comics 1, hell, even Amazing Fantasy 15, for years now, a lot of hardcore collectors have been priced out of these markets because the asset price of vintage comic books has been rising exponentially compared to other asset classes by and large. Now in 2021, pretty much every asset class is trending to new highs, whether it's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, precious metals, cryptocurrency, collectibles, antiques. Whatever asset class we are looking at is achieving new highs at present time. Well, a company, not CGC, but another authentication company has come into the comic book space to make a new catalyst that may cause certain prices to be paid for some of these comic books to seem somewhat reasonable. Now, hear me out here, because this is an interesting concept, and I want to make sure that I give you guys the pros and cons, and then top this video off with what I feel about this new development. There is a company called Page Authentication. And yes, this is as bad as you can think it is. This company pretty much grades incomplete comic books. And by that, I mean individual pages of comic books. They will encase these particular pages in Mylar and issue an actual numerical grade to these particular items where they can be sold on the secondary market as treasured collectibles. Now, to be fair, before I cut this company up, pun intended on that, if you get the joke, we do have to talk about the pros of this service. It is possible that maybe you know someone, maybe you came across someone who found a Action Comics 1 or a Detective Comics 27 or even an Amazing Fantasy 15 or an Incredible Hulk issue 1 that was in very bad condition. Maybe the cover was ripped off, maybe a lot of the pages were soiled, but as they paged through what was left of the book, they did find a couple of pages that were intact and were in fairly good condition. If that's the case, I have no problem if somebody says, you know what, I'm going to send what's left of this book to CPA, Comic Page Authentication, and I'm going to let them remove the pages that are salvageable, grade them, and assign a grade to them, and send it back to me certified and complete. Now, this is important because if that is where you fall, meaning you're somebody that for years has held on to one of these key books and it might be coverless, it might be in a lot of damage, I can understand why a service like Comic Page Authentication exists. There is somewhat of a need, I know that's disputable, for a service like this to exist on the secondary market when we start analyzing the comic book marketplace for how and what it is in the year 2021. And right now, as I told you in the beginning of this video, prices are soaring for a lot of near mint, especially key issue comic books from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Even some comic books that came out in the 90s and the early 2000s are selling for a premium in this particular market. So I get if somebody out there has a mangled copy of Action Comics 1, and they just kept it because they know it's iconic. They really don't know what to do with it because if they send it to CGC, CGC is most likely not going to grade it because it is in such horrible condition that literally only a couple of the pages are readable and or intact. Then, yes, I agree with the existence of a company like Page Authentication. Now, this is where this video goes from bad to worse. How many comic book collectors out there are actually sitting on a mangled copy of Action Comics 1, Detective Comics 27, or an Incredible Hulk 1, or an Amazing Fantasy 15, or another equivalent comic book where it actually pays to get individual pages graded and authenticated so that some speculator or would-be investor could come along and bid those particular pages up on the secondary market? You see where I'm going with this? The problem that I have with this particular service, and I am going to put a link to the actual website that is now operable by this particular company in the video description below so that you can click on it, you can check it out for yourself. But just know, here's the problem that I have with this. It is going to fundamentally change the game of collecting comic books. Now, that is assuming this service takes off, because I can tell you what's going to happen. Somebody looks at a book like a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300, and maybe they only have that book in 6.0. Now, that book in 6.0, let's be realistic. Let's look at the CGC census. You can see that pretty much almost 20,000 copies of that book exist that are out there graded. And most of those copies exist in high grade. Most people are not going to want a CGC 6.0 or 6.5 copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300. So this is where I think some of these speculators, some of these sellers are going to get a little bit creative and they're going to go, you know, the panels or the pages of that particular comic book that introduce Venom are going to be highly sought after. Rather than keeping that book slabbed or sending it in for slabbing and getting it graded through CGC and having it come back a 6 or a 6.5, which isn't going to really sell for a premium in the secondary market, I'm better off sending the book into CPA, Comic Page Authentication Company, and letting them grade the key pages in that comic book and selling them separately. That way, if somebody already has a CGC copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300 9.8 condition, they might be willing to pay a premium for the graded pages that introduce Venom, because that way they can actually see those pages and hang them on a wall next to that particular comic book, or they can put the comic book away in storage or in a safety deposit box, and all they have to do is frame those particular pages, and it speaks volumes to what that collector has, what he collects, and what he is an enthusiast of. So this is kind of a new way for collecting some of these comic books, basically from the inside out. So I do give credence to that idea. The problem is, I think the people that are going to benefit the most out of this are going to be the dealers that try to promote this service, the speculators that stand behind this service, trying to get Timmys, Kimmies, and Poindexters out there to invest in loose, graded comic book pages rather than the actual comic book. And as a result, this could, if it catches on, again, guys, if it catches on, this can act like a catalyst that is going to fundamentally change comic book collecting going forward. Now, I know some of you out there are going to disagree with that assessment, but keep in mind, I did issue a major caveat there by saying if this catches on. If this continues to be a fringe idea and most people don't flock to it, and the service really doesn't get promoted that much by auction companies, by dealers, or there isn't much interest on eBay and other auction sites where these particular items could be consigned to, then most likely this will not have a major impact in the comic book collecting marketplace. But rest assured, it could. Now, for those of you wondering, to take advantage of this particular service, you cannot remove the pages yourself. Let me say that again. And I want to make this very clear because it is listed in their FAQs on the website. You have to send them whatever is left of that mangled comic book and tell them what pages you want them to remove, grade, authenticate, and encapsulate. And they will perform that service for you. So this is an interesting idea. I am pretty much 100% against this idea because, as I've stated, how many people out there are going to have access to a comic book on par with an Action Comics 1 or even an Amazing Fantasy 15 that are going to require a service like this? The answer is few and far between. Most of the people that are going to be using this service are going to be Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters who think that it would be cool to take a lower grade or a bad condition New Mutants 98 or an Amazing Spider-Man 300 or a mangled Walking Dead 1, if one actually exists, and have certain key pages graded and hanging on a wall that they think are going to have value on the secondary market going forward. Now, again, a big what if here that we don't know is, are collectors going to flock to this concept? Now, this company has been in existence, I think, from the fall of 2020. So literally, it's only a couple of months old. So we're going to see how this pans out and what happens from here. Again, I am split on this concept. I see that it could have potential good uses in the overall comic collecting community. But I also see opportunities for a lot of misuse of a service like this. And overall, I don't think the company, Comic Page Authentication, is going to care, because even if collectors are misusing the service by taking a Wolverine 1 or a Wolverine Limited Series 1 in low grade and sending it in just to get key pages of that particular book graded and encapsulated, I think what's going to happen over time is the market is going to adjust if this would catch on. And that is my fear, guys. So I'm presenting this from an unbiased manner. I know nothing of the owners of this company. I don't know how legit, I don't know how reputable this is. Time will tell whether this company gains traction or it just ends up as a fringe grading company that no one really utilizes. Now, again, I want to state this before I end this video. If you are thinking of investing in vintage comic books at present time, I encourage you to go back, watch some of my videos where I talked about the vintage comic book marketplace, how I think parts of that market are extremely overblown, especially in the year 2021. But if you do want to take the plunge, I would tell you to go after high-grade copies of key issues from the Golden, Silver, Bronze Age that were graded and encapsulated by CGC, and ignore this new development for now. Hope that helps. Hope you have a great night. Hope you enjoyed this particular video. Please let me know your comments below in the comment section so I can see what other collectors out there think of this particular service. Thanks for watching and have a great night.